Hey, what's up, everybody? You know what time it is. Your boy Jeffrey L. Boney for another hot edition of Real Talk Junkies Live. So glad that you joined us on this morning. Man, we got a lot to talk about. Some interesting conversation today, especially with the height of what's going on in this country with racial tension, racism, white supremacy, all kind of stuff going on, man. We see it in the news day after day after day. It seems like it's non-ceasing, especially after George Floyd's tragic murder caught on camera, man. Here we got another situation here in the Harris County area, greater Houston area that we want to talk about on today. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Make sure you share the link with all your friends, all your family, all your foes, whoever needs to hear this information on today. Make sure you get with them. Of course, I want to encourage everybody again to go to jeffreylboney.com, pick up the new book, Don't Argue With Me, and of course, check out the Forward Times Facebook page, the Forward Times website, forwardtimes.com, to check out the recent and latest stories that we as the Black press talk about on a regular basis. Of course, this is powered by Black and Forward, and we want to encourage everybody to tune in every week here for Real Talk Junkies. Joining me today to talk about the tragic murder of another African-American male here in the greater Houston area by the name of Roderick Brooks. It's our understanding that he was chased down, he was beaten, he was tasered, and he was ultimately shot to death by a Harris County sheriff. And to talk about this case and two individuals who've been actively on the front lines in the community and recently held a press conference to talk about it, none other than community activist Brother Deric Muhammad and attorney, civil rights attorney altogether, Sadiyah Evangelista. I want to make sure I get it right. Evangelista Kareem. All right, come on, join us on Real Talk Junkies, y'all. All right, let's give it up, y'all. Let's give it up. Real Talk Junkies. Good to see you on today. All right. Good to see you, good brother. Y'all have a seat. All right, so you all recently held a press conference. I saw the details with the family of Roderick Brooks. First of all, let's talk about what happened on the day that he was murdered.
Yes. So, I received a phone call from family members on Saturday morning. And when I reached out to the family, of course, they was distraught. They didn't really know what happened to their brother. And so on that Saturday, we tried to figure out where his body was. And we ended up going to Harris County, the Forensic Independent Science Building.
So wait a minute, let's backtrack. You were trying to figure out where his body was, so they already knew he was dead, or
correct?
I mean, so how did they find that out?
So some people called them. Some other people called them and told them that their brother had died, and then they
were witnesses to what had happened.
Absolutely.
Oh wow. Okay.
Absolutely, they were witnesses. And so once they found out where that their brother had deceased by law enforcement, then they found out further through the media is how they got an official statement that their brother was shot by law enforcement.
So they found out that Roderick Brooks, their brother, had been murdered or was dead by way of the media.
By way of the media. And then the way the media interpreted what happened. And of course, it's the story that we hear all the time, that Roderick was reaching for the taser, therefore the officer was justified in shooting and killing Roderick, which was not the case based on 6 bystanders who actually saw what happened. And I had a conversation with them about what happened.
All right, I want to get to that a little further, but Brother Deric, let's talk about how he ended up getting murdered by the officer. It's my understanding that he was allegedly stealing a bar of soap.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Yes, Roderick Brooks had a history of mental health issues, like many unarmed Black men who were murdered by police officers in this country. According to the story that we've been told, Roderick was shoplifting from a Dollar General store.
Okay.
Dollar General, don't nothing that costs more than $1.
Well, nowadays
they hit you with the $2.99.
They hit you with the $2.99. They switched up the game.
And so Roderick had a history of shoplifting for toiletries, soap, shampoo, things of this nature. And this is what happened on that day. So according to what we've been told, Roderick stole some shampoo, and the police were called. The officer, Gary Hardin is his name?
Garrett Webster Hardin.
Garrett Webster Hardin was called. Now this this officer is a supervisor. He's a sergeant, so he's in charge.
Mhm.
So he chased after our brother Roderick Brooks in the vehicle at first. Then he stops.
So Roderick is on foot.
Roderick's on foot.
Okay.
The officer is in his police cruiser alone, no backup. All right. That's very important.
Okay.
He abandons his cruiser. They say he tried to put the cruiser in park, but accidentally put it in reverse. This happened at 6:30 in the evening. It was probably still 102, 103, 105 degrees here in Houston. So he engaged in a foot race. Mind you, this is a shoplifter. He hadn't killed anybody. He hadn't aggravatedly assaulted anyone. It's a shoplifter. He's chasing after a shoplifter. He pulls out his taser and he shoots a shampoo shoplifter. He shoots him with the taser, and afterwards, he falls to the ground. You get hit with 50,000 volts. That's what you do. He fell to the ground, and according to witnesses, the officer took his fist and started beating Roderick in the face. The family corroborates this because when they went to view his remains, he had the markings in his face. Now, mind you, this brother was not a violent individual. According to his sister, he didn't even know how to operate a cell phone. If you don't know how to operate a cell phone, you don't know how to operate a taser, right? And the officer lied and said that he shot him because he was reaching for the taser. You'd already shot him with the taser, so the taser was dead.
Mm.
But the police officer reached into his waistband, grabbed his service weapon, and shot the brother of all places in his neck. Which, you know, that is a kill shot. When you shoot somebody in the neck, the intention is not to stop them, to maim them, or to just make them to disable them. You're shooting to kill. This happened at 6:30 p.m. in broad daylight on the corner of Kirkendall and Bamelwood. And I'd like to add that more than one witness has said that they heard the officer use the N-word while chasing the brother down. We cannot substantiate that, obviously, because the sheriff's department is refusing to release the video, even after making public claims that this will be a transparent investigation. So this was a murder in broad daylight. And let me also say that we've gotten intelligence from reliable sources within law enforcement that this officer has a history of questionable racist activity that's documented.
All right, I want to get back to that. Sister Sadiyah, going back to the family, and I'm assuming you're representing the family?
So yes, I'm representing a family. Also, they've also hired a civil rights law firm that deals in police misconduct, and that would be Attorney Justin Moore as well.
Okay, so going back to, you know, what Brother Deric said, that going down, now they know where the body is. There's all these visible marks. I mean, can you walk us through, in your conversation with the family, kind of that whole experience and how the family, I guess, responded?
Of course, the family is devastated because this is, you know, out of, I believe, 11 of them, this was the baby brother of the whole group. And of course, he had mental health issues. He had an intellectual disability.
How old was he?
He was 47 years of age.
47
years of age. And, you know, Roderick is loved by his family. The way that media initially portrayed him was of some criminal who was really just being, you know, disrespectful to the police and just a menace to society, but that's not who he is. And so when the family found out about this, they wanted to make sure that the world knows who Roderick Brooks is, that he's a loved man. Of course, he had mental health issues, but it's not against the law to be in poverty, broke, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that the system set up for him to be in poverty. And so what the officer did is he killed a man for a crime that was nothing more than a Class C misdemeanor. And you don't arrest people like that.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the video that will come out will show that the officer really tried to plant the taser by Brother Roderick as to set the scene up. He even went to the point as to pull his pants down as if he was trying to look for a weapon, knowing that he did it after the fact and he didn't have a weapon. So when you look at the autopsy report and where he was shot and killed, it was at the base of the neck, as brother Deric talked about, right there by the skull. That's an execution murder. And when the family saw the pictures that the morgue did for them, because they haven't seen the autopsy report yet, because they're being refused to even see that. They saw the blunt force trauma that was on his face that the witnesses had described, the officer who was pulverizing and beating him literally to death.
So let's talk about that. As an attorney, no viewing of the video. Nobody's seen it yet?
No.
Well, I'm talking about
the
his family or
family
you
hasn't
all.
seen it yet.
So you all haven't seen it. The family
No,
hasn't
we
seen
have
it
not.
yet. All right. And so the autopsy report, you all haven't seen it. The family hadn't seen it.
Not yet.
So as an attorney, how can that? When was he murdered?
He was murdered July 8th
So
on a Friday.
So July 8th, he was murdered. So we're talking about going on 3 weeks.
Come on.
So what is from a legal perspective, what is the problem with that, or how is that even possible?
Well, they're stalling. I believe they know that the video looks bad. Here you would have an officer a week prior to this incident. He deployed his taser on an individual who had some mental health issues and jumped on top of a freeway bridge, who, probably was committing suicide. And this officer was known to tase him. The guy fell 35 feet down. He's in critical condition right now. So we pray that, he lives through this. But here we have a rogue cop. And so
wait a minute, hold on, whoa. You say a week before the shooting of Roderick Brooks. This is a whole nother situation.
This is a whole nother
But the same cop.
The same cop who was a white cop.
Yes.
Correct.
The same cop. Well, it doesn't matter, white or whatever. I mean, he's a law enforcement officer who happens to be white. A week before Roderick Brooks's murder, he tased another man who was on the freeway, not committing a crime, but potentially seeking to possibly commit suicide.
Right. He had a mental health crisis.
He had a mental health crisis, and he tased him, and the man fell 35 feet and is now in critical condition.
Right. And
just 1 week before this.
And witnesses on that particular scene said, I'm going to light his up. So here we have a rogue.
He said, I'm going to light his ass up.
Correct.
The one that was having a mental health crisis on the bridge?
Correct.
The cop said, I'm going to light his ass.
This is what witnesses are saying.
According to the witnesses who were there.
Brother Deric, now, you talked about, I'm going to come back to you, because I want to get into this about this guy, this officer. You said that there are internal witnesses or people that state that this officer has a history of this. Are you at liberty to speak to some of those previous instances?
Well, we've spoken to one of them. I was also told that the same officer has in the past been no-billed for shooting and killing, if I'm not mistaken.
2011.
A black person in 2011?
Yes.
Okay. So these are credible sources. We're not at liberty to unveil exactly who's giving us this information, but they are nervous. They are nervous, brother.
Who is they?
They, law enforcement.
Okay.
In this country, in this county. I got a call from the police chief about this, 2 days ago.
You talking about Houston police chief?
The Houston police. Yeah, they're nervous because they fear that this video has quote unquote riot potential. Those were not the police chief's words, but that's the sentiment. So if this were a video that cleared the officer, if this was a video that justified the shooting of Roderick Brooks,
we'd have seen it by now.
We would have seen the video 2 weeks ago. See, this is the kind of quote unquote corrupt authority that we live under. The taxpayers in Harris County paid tens of millions of dollars for these body cameras. Every taxpayer in Harris County should be pissed off because we did not purchase the body cameras for you to be able to use the footage to soften the blow of a quote unquote riot potential video or to use them as a tool to create a cover up. We paid for the videos to help to facilitate the way for transparency
and accountability.
And it pisses me off, brother, because you playing with these people.
Mm-hmm.
These are good people.
Mm-hmm.
These are country folk. You know, they ain't even from the city.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
They just want to know what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And what it looks like is we've allowed a racist, white supremacist police officer to slip through the cracks. Not only was he patrolling a black community
by himself,
he's a supervisor.
By himself.
Yeah, like who jumps out of their police cruiser to chase down a shoplifter with no backup? Who does that? And you mean to tell me that this man was allowed to be in a supervisory position? See, the problem is not diversity or lack of diversity. The problem is not lack of black and brown people in leadership and law enforcement. The problem is not, defund the police. That's not the problem. The problem is racist policing.
Yes.
So the problem you have for Harris County Sheriff's Department, you have a systemic racial problem internally, right? So you have an officer that they knew had history internally with racism or racist incidents with their own. And then now you have a rogue officer who has been on leave several different times for questionable actions. And then they continue to allow this rogue cop to stay on the street. And then a week later, after he tased and tased this young man who was having a mental health crisis, who almost died, he ends up killing someone.
He back on the streets by himself, patrolling the black neighborhood,
knowing this man is a liability to the community.
But it's interesting to me, y'all, that we hear stories like this all the time. The advent of social media and these cell phone cameras and stuff, it's changed since the days of Rodney King. And even before Rodney King, you didn't even have a Rodney King type of situation with cameras and videos and stuff like that. So, these things have happened over and over and over again. And sadly, they've happened with people that are in authority to kill, have the legal authority to kill by way of their weapon that they have been issued. And to hear this story and how he was murdered, why he was murdered, it's troubling to me, man. And I go back to, I want to say it was 2014. I'm not looking at my notes at the moment, but I do know I've written about this before. I think it was 2014 that FBI released a report that stated that the biggest threat to America was the infiltration of white supremacists into law enforcement. And so when you get this report from the FBI and their intelligence that the greatest threat to the democracy, to the United States, to our livelihood was the infiltration of white supremacists into law enforcement back in I want to say it was 2014. You fast forward 8 years later and you ask yourself the question, what's being done? Attorney General Merrick Garland just released a statement after the young white 19-year-old boy who murdered the individuals, the 10 individuals at Tops Supermarket in Buffalo, New York, and injured many others. And I don't know if you all saw the video where he actually had the camera strapped to his AR and live streamed it. And he pointed his weapon at the white man who was leaning down, and he saw that he was a white man, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And he turned it away from him because he wasn't targeting the white man. He was targeting black people. And Merrick Garland released a statement where he acknowledges that white supremacy in this country, white supremacist ideals are infiltrating this country like never before, and something needs to be done about it. So in line to what you're talking about, Brother Deric, and I'll talk to you now, Sister Sadiyah, what are your thoughts on how do we address this issue? Or is there a way to address this issue?
Well, absolutely. Well, first of all, let's start with Harris County alone.
Okay.
So, Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, he knows what's going on in his department. Yet he's allowing these bad apples to continue to fester. So we're dealing with leadership who are afraid to get rid of these bad cops. We can talk about training, we can talk about bias training, we can do all of that. But unless you remove these cops and don't allow them to go into somebody else's department and get another job, because that's what you're finding out is that they'll get fired and then they'll just move to another department. But we have to take away their ability to be able to continue to police our communities. So we got to get rid of top leadership, first of all. And then we have to clean out the departments and get rid of these dirty cops.
That sounds like a heavy lift, Brother Deric.
Yes, the issue is we have to be clear and conscious of the fact that we're dealing with two systems. You're dealing with the criminal justice system, and you're also dealing with the good old boy system that runs the criminal justice system. It's interesting that the Attorney General would say that white supremacist ideals are infiltrating our country. The reality is the country was built on white supremacist ideals. It is at the foundation of what we call the United States of America. So it doesn't have to be infiltrated. It already is what it is. And the first thing that Black people have to do is become conscious of it. We have to stop accepting the illusion of inclusion. You are at risk for being killed for the color of your skin at every level, by those who are in authority and those who may not be in authority. The white boy at the Tops grocery store, he didn't have a badge, but you were still at risk. This police officer that killed Roderick Brooks, he's got a badge. You still at risk. You're dealing with the same mindset. So I keep reiterating the point that the problem is racist policing. There's a good old boy system that has created a culture within law enforcement nationwide, in Harris County and beyond, who when they wake up in the morning and they strap on their belts, their job is not to serve and protect when they come to the Black community. Let me tell you, let's be clear on that. Let's be clear on that. When they come into the Black community, when they go into those white zip codes, they're there to serve and protect. But when they come into Black zip codes where you and I were raised, their job is to make sure that what happens in our community don't spill over into the white community. And what they do is they will, by any means necessary, even if it means to get rid of you, protect white folk against Black folk, protect rich folks from poor folk. And this is what they do. But ultimately, we're going to have to revisit the words of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad and look at separating from this country whose foundation, who at the foundation is white supremacist ideals. We're still living behind enemy lines, my brother. And we got to sound the alarm for Black people. I don't care if you're six-figure Black folk. I don't care if you multi-million-dollar Black folk. I don't care if you live in the projects or if you call yourself so-called middle class. You ain't no better than Roderick Brooks. At the end of the day, we are all in danger.
Sister Sadiyah.
Oh, he's absolutely right. I mean, we're subjected to this constitution where at one time we were property, right? We were slaves, and we were property. It was chattel slavery. We were 3/5 of a person. And now all of a sudden we believe that we have full rights as a United States citizen, and that is not the case. So we're dealing with a system that is in a racist system that is embedded into the Constitution. And as much as we fight against it, every day we wake up and we see that it's still there in our community.
I know that Marcus Garvey, who's considered the father of Pan-Africanism, had the same approach to try to, do the separation and have us, not so much separation for the sake of just separating, but for empowerment of us as a people. And I'm bringing him up because, you talked about, separate.
Yes, sir.
And, that's practically somewhat impossible for so many people conceptually for us to be able to do that because of Many reasons, socioeconomic being primarily. How do we actually move in this direction? Because it's frustrating to so many,
Right.
to keep having the same conversation over and over and over and over again, seeing the same videos over and over and over again, hearing the same stories, and seeing the things happening and wondering, when is it my time for me or for my family or my loved one or my child, my mother, my uncle, my daddy? So, Sister Sadiyah, I mean, let's have a real conversation though about this. How do we move in that direction, understanding the powers that be many of them do not want that change to happen, and they don't want to see us empowered and come together. And it seems like a lot of us have bought into this illusion of inclusion and this so-called integration, and that we are just as equal as those that don't look like us.
So what you're seeing now, I know it's a difficult conversation to have about separation, but separation is already happening. You're seeing a lot of African Americans, Black people here in the United States are buying up their own properties and creating their own communities. And in the Nation of Islam, we have our own education system, right? We have a concept of doing for ourselves so that we don't have to go on the white man's plantation and ask them for a job. We're creating jobs for ourselves. So we're getting out of the white man's mouth, a white man's pocket, a white man's education system. But we also have to get out of their criminal justice system. So when we create our own communities, our own schools, our own environments, we have to learn to not necessarily police ourselves, right? Because we don't need policing. We got to get them out of our communities. We're dealing with a lot of mental health issues. It's on account because of the injustices that we have endured, right? When you're dealing with an unjust system, it makes one mentally unstable. And so as we withdraw from their schools, as we withdraw from their plantations or their workplace, and we start creating for ourselves, and you see that happening, our job is to bring attention to those renegade, those bad cops, those bad seeds that are stopping us to have freedom, justice, and equality. So I beg to differ and say that it's not happening. Martin Luther King talked about integrating us into a burning house, right? And we saw what happened to him. But we have to keep talking about separation because that is the only answer. We talked about integration, but what did we integrate into? We integrated into an unjust system. So now we have to create a different system that is based on freedom, justice, and equality. And it is happening at this time.
Yeah, I'll only echo what Sister Sadiyah has said because she explained it perfectly. And thank you for bringing up that point, because many people are confused and afraid when they hear the term separation. Separation doesn't mean go back to Africa. Separation doesn't mean let's round up 40 to 50 million of us. Let's get on the boat and let's expatriate. That's not what I'm saying. Our forefathers built this country, and we have a right to be here. We have a right to land here. We have a right to live here. But as Sister Sadiyah already explained, when we say separation, we're talking about let's live independently of the systems that have already been metastasized with white supremacy and create our own systems. So you can start with the Black Dollar Project, by spending your money with Black-owned businesses, thereby creating a Black economy separate from theirs. And in creating a Black economy, when a Black family, a hardworking Black family wants to come in to get a loan for a piece of land or a home, you're not discriminated against because you're borrowing from your own. So we must separate economically, we must separate politically, we must separate educationally, we must separate spiritually, we must separate from every system that has been created to continue to make us second, third, fourth, and fifth class citizens in the country that our forefathers built.
And you talked about industry, you talk about so many things. I mean, I often ask people when we have these type of discussions, I was like, what do Black people actually have control over? What do we own? What do we have control over in this country? You look at everything that we are dependent upon, and we have no power collectively over those things. You talked about lending. You talked about the housing market, and you think about redlining and all that stuff that was established years ago, and then you think about the healthcare industry. You think about our food, our water.
Right. When you look at from the housing perspective, okay, you grew up in South Park, right?
In
You grew up in South Park. I grew up in 5th Ward. Sister Sadiyah, she grew up near me, right? Those neighborhoods before our grandparents moved into them were white neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And the property value was high. Then when they signed the integration bill and black people started moving into those neighborhoods, all of a sudden the property value went down. White people started moving out. Okay. Then now the neighborhood is black. We don't want to be around one another because our value, our own value, we believe is centered around our nearness to white people. So we start moving to Missouri City. Then white people start moving to Richmond.
Not Missouri City.
Okay.
I'm just messing with
you. No, not Mo City.
Yeah.
I'm talking Missouri City. It's two different. That's a different. All right. Then they started moving to Richmond. We followed them out to Richmond. Then they got tired of running, and they started moving back in to South Park, back in the 3rd Ward, back in the 5th Ward. We call it gentrification. Now, all of a sudden, when white people move back into our neighborhoods, now they tell us that the property value is skyrocketing. Yeah. It's through the roof. Why? Because we're dependent upon their system of valuation to tell us how much what we own is worth.
Yeah.
And we have to separate ourselves totally from that kind of mindset.
So you believe it's a separation of the mind, or are you saying that it's a separation of the resources and actually interaction?
It has to start with the mind, because when you have the mind, the body will follow. And so when you change this mindset of black people feeling like they are inferior or subordinate or insubordinate to whites, because we're not, right? We're actually the original. Right. And then when we separate ourselves and we become independent from them, but it's a mindset, right? We have to know that if we pool our resources together, that's about $13 trillion, right? That's enough for a whole nation, right? I believe it'll be the 16th nation in the world if we but understood that there is power in our economics. And that's really the only thing that the white man understands is the money, because America was based off of the backs of black people, but you had to follow the economics of it.
Yeah. So, and everything that seemingly brought forth alleged change as it relates to the empowerment of black folks in this country that was decided upon by those that don't look like us came because of some economic pressure.
Absolutely.
That came about. Even you go with the Montgomery bus boycott. And even before that, Dr. King took that model from Baton Rouge. Pastor Jemison down there in Baton Rouge, he met with him and copied and pasted what they did in Baton Rouge that brought about change in the city, but it all was tied to the economics aspect of it. And I look at what's going on right now. I'm sure you all saw the viral video of the Sesame Place with the two little girls that was just simply they were excited. Their parents spent money to go to this theme park, this amusement theme park owned by Sesame. And the little character Rosita is going down the parade route. And, you see that Rosita just high fives the white adult and the white child, and then gets to the little black kids and was like, no, and you see the hurt on their faces. And it wasn't until the lady posted it on Instagram, the mother posted it on Instagram explaining, she's like, you'll never see my dollars again. And she was like, matter of fact, y'all should give me a refund or whatever. And it went viral. Attorney Ben Crump shared it. Then Kelly Rowland, Grammy Award winner, Houston's own, Destiny's Child, she commented on the apology that Sesame Place put out. And if you saw the original apology, it was weak. It was real, and it was like a justification of trying to explain what, you can't tell me that what I saw wasn't what I saw on that video. Right. But yet they tried to justify it and skirt it over, and people was like, no, I ain't hearing it. And so after the continued pressure, when they realized this is impacting our dollar, they issued a second apology, reached out to the family, saying that they're gonna have what you talked about earlier, bias training and all this type of stuff. And now they're talking about change and dealing with insensitivity and racism, but it was already there. Because now there are other videos that are surfacing of other instances, like you said earlier before we got on the show. There are other instances out there that show the same exact thing. So it's embedded. So it was just something caught on camera, right, but it's always there. What are y'all thoughts on that?
So, you see these corporations, they gaslight us in our community when an incident. We saw this big time with the murder of George Floyd, where all of these corporations now want to donate into Black causes or minority causes because they understand the significance of our economic dollars. We don't understand it, but they understand it.
Right.
And so with these little girls, of course, I kept seeing video after video of the systemic racism inside of their corporation. And I'm quite sure that they know what's going on behind or underneath these costumes, these people that they're allowing into their place of system. And if we look at the history of Sesame Street, it took place for Black children in Harlem, right? Mm-hmm. And then corporation took over Sesame Street. So again, our Black dollars are important, but we have to understand the value. That's why when we look at the Tulsa riots and the other communities that were destroyed because of our Black prosperity, right? So again, we need to be independent. We need to utilize our Black dollars to come together, pool all of our resources, whether it's just our economic, our political, our social, our educational resources, and stop begging and asking other people to give to us what we can do for ourselves.
Yeah, after seeing the Sesame Street video, it's like white America is saying to Black America, what else do you all need to see? See, this is the thing that really stuck with me about that. It's proof that even your children, 2 years old, 3 years old, they're already subject to being discriminated against because of the color of their skin, even at 2 and 3 years old. That's what Sesame Street is saying to the babies. Welcome into racist America. Get used to it. So what more do we need to see, my brother? And it's like this. I'm not a proponent of kicking your child out at the age of 18. I'm not a proponent.
You're talking about out the house.
Just out the house.
Yeah.
I'm not, you kick them out when they're ready, but make sure they're ready for the world. But at some point, when you grow to a certain age, when you mature to a certain level, you're going to start bumping heads with your parents. You're going to want things done this way. Or here's a curfew. I don't want to follow the curfew. And at some point, you have to realize it's time for me to go and get my own. I'm mature enough now. When we talk about separation, what we're saying to Black America is, it is time for us to get we're mature enough. We don't need them or their systems to govern our affairs anymore. No matter how much we protest, no matter how many sit-ins we did back in the 60s, no matter how many hashtags we create, no matter how many
organizations,
no justice, no matter how many coalitions, they still continue to prove to us that in their minds, we don't belong here in their system. And the last thing I'll say is this, going back to what Sister Sadiyah said about how the separation is already taking place. Every corporation and every influential entity in this country is scrambling to keep their institution white. They're scrambling to keep it white. Why? Because the New York Times wrote an article 3 years ago, and I believe it said 47 out of the 50 states, more white people died than were being born. While at the same time, the birth rate of Black people steadily increases. And I want to say to Black women out there, the most revolutionary thing you can do is give birth to a Black child and take care of it, right? Our Hispanic, Latino brothers and sisters steady reproducing. And so the demographers are saying that by the year 2050, white people will be the minority in this country and not the majority. 2050 is just around the corner.
Yeah.
So yeah, they trying to keep Sesame Street white. They trying to keep the House white, the Senate white, the White House white. They trying to keep it all white because a natural thing is taking place where they are being swept out of the equation, and black and brown people are being empowered just demographically because we continue to with growth population.
I've always said to individuals that, when it comes to certain politics, many conservatives, if you want to call them conservatives, Republicans, people of the Republican Party, they've latched on to two things that these quote unquote evangelicals have to gain their and keep their support. One is the same sex marriage conversation and being against that, but also being supportive of overturning Roe versus Wade. And I've always had the conversation and even arguments at times to people that this is not a morality issue. That they're using that as, we talk about gaslighting, to try to gain support, but this is really about preserving white life.
Yes.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
there was a rally where Donald Trump was about to speak.
Yeah.
And a white congresswoman was introducing him.
Yes.
And she said out of her own mouth, if you heard it,
She let it slip.
she said, "Thank you for preserving white life."
Yes.
Yes, and if you look at the history of the eugenics movement, right? Because the eugenics movement was about the annihilation of African Americans or minorities,
Right.
period.
Right.
Margaret Sanger,
Yes.
who was one of the founders of
Planned
Planned Parenthood,
Yep.
right? And the thing was, they were trying to eliminate blacks and browns,
Yeah.
right? And so Planned Parenthood was one of the backers of Hillary Clinton.
Mhm.
And I believe they backed her with $40 million. Well, why would you do that?
Mhm.
We know that Planned Parenthood came into our communities, right?
Mhm.
Planned Parenthood was the number one killer of black people up until recently at 17, I believe 18 million deaths with black bodies with our babies. And then they use our tissue in order to
Right.
advance quote unquote research so that they can live. And then now we see that their numbers are dwindling. And so now all of a sudden you want to come and you want to overturn Roe v. Wade so that you can begin to start producing again, because what you're finding out is the poor white people were utilizing Planned Parenthood
Right.
and getting rid of their
Way
own
more,
babies
yeah.
more than black people.
Right. Way
So
more.
now we got to stop that, because
Yeah.
we were never in favor of getting rid of our babies.
Right.
It was Planned Parenthood who would come into our communities and be bought off by these handkerchief head preachers to convince black people in order to get rid of their baby. Back in 2005, when Katrina came, right? Then what you found was FEMA came in convincing black people in order to get subsidies, right?
Mhm.
Then we needed you to go get some birth control methods. And that's just all over across the nation. Look at Bill Gates. His daddy was a part of the eugenics movement.
Right.
So when we talk about the depopulation efforts, he makes no qualms about using immunization, quote unquote, vaccines in order to depopulate the black population.
Yeah.
So again, we can say it's a morality issue. We can say it's really a political issue, but it's really about white supremacy and them trying to gain control of the population.
Yeah.
Right. The depopulation issue is really a de-Negroization
Mhm.
plan. That's really what it is. And I'm saying it nicely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But think about it, bro. Let's say you stepped on an elevator and there were 12 people on the elevator, you being the 12th. You're outnumbered 11-1. And let's just say all 11 of those people, turned on you and they tried to fight you or whatever, right? You would do whatever you got to do in order to get off of that elevator, including kill everybody on that elevator.
Mhm.
We outnumber white people 11-1 globally.
Yeah.
This is a survival thing for them. Dr. Chris Wilson called it the white genetic annihilation. They're trying to survive white genetic annihilation, because think about it. You got the malt liquor in our community that kills the sperm cells. You got poison in the food. You got poison in the water. You've got Planned Parenthood marketing to the hilt in our community. You got so many things that are working against our population growth, but black people are still so masterfully and spiritually blessed by the Almighty. We're still
Yeah.
growing.
It's like you can't stop it.
No,
Can't
you
destroy
can't
us.
stop.
It's like putting raid on some.
It could destroy us.
But what
Can't
we
stop.
have to understand, and I want to make this point to our people. Yes, we will surpass white people in population growth, but that doesn't necessarily mean power.
Yeah.
Okay. South Africa is probably 95, 96, 97% black, but the white South Africans still control the country of South Africa. What we have to go, we don't have to wait until we outnumber them in population. We got to go after that power right now. Our time is right now. We don't have to wait. Our time is now.
You know, I was thinking about, you know, you talked about George Floyd. We talked about George Floyd and the response to what happened, and it's something that they could not ignore because it was in the midst of COVID. Everybody was at the crib, and on Memorial Day, everybody saw that video.
Right.
Because they was at the crib, couldn't go nowhere.
Right.
And they were forced to see what this white officer did to this black man. It was unjustifiable. It was brutal. It was horrifying to watch. But they had to watch one of their own do this to this black man who did nothing wrong, allegedly have a $20 counterfeit bill. I say all that to say is the response to that and people wanting to give to the causes and now all of a sudden have all of this, you know, you had the NBA, everybody got the court, you know, with Black Lives Matter and on their jerseys, it was Black Lives Matter. Everybody incorporating all this black, pro-black stuff. Right before the George Floyd incident, you had Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. It's so ironic, right? That he was taking a knee to bring to the attention of America and the powers that be that white supremacy, racism was alive and well and needed to be addressed with, particularly in law enforcement. He's telling the world it, but then they try to flip it, or they do flip it with the narrative to say, oh, he's against the military, he's anti-America. And it's so funny. I was watching the Dave Chappelle special where he talks about the history of blacks in this country, and he said, you know, and you fast forward to recently, man, and you know, I never knew that the biggest thing that would be able to be like a what do you call it? Superman was a kryptonite. The kryptonite to white people was taking a knee during the national anthem. He did it as a joke, but it's just, think about it. Like, people was up in arms against everything that Colin Kaepernick was standing for because he took a knee. Nothing else mattered to them. I mean, we were screaming, we was yelling, we was protesting, we was rioting. None of that got their attention, but him taking a knee.
Right.
Got them up in arms.
Right.
And so you fast forward from him taking a knee to someone putting a knee on a black man's neck, and that now gets your attention.
So, you know, we talked about, I just keep thinking about, we can't change a condition of a people. We can't change our own condition until we change the conditions of our mind, right? And so Black people, we are one of the most spiritual people on this planet, right? But we've been sold a false bill of goods when it came to our religion.
Yeah.
Because now the religion that was fed to us was Christianity, but it was based on white supremacy, right? And we forgive those and turn our cheeks to the other side as they slapped us. But real spiritualism, real revolutionary spiritualism is being able to use our mind and fight for freedom, justice, and equality. And so what you saw during George Floyd was us saying, you know what? Enough is enough. We're not going to turn our head the other way. And so what you see now is this the steady, and the media is doing this, Brother Jeff, where they keep showing us body after body, police brutality after police brutality, so that we can get dumbed down or we can get numb at what we are seeing. But we have to make sure that we keep our spirituality at the forefront. We got to make sure that we know that what's happening is ordained by God. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan told us, don't take their vaccines back in 2004. Why? Because it had so many poisons that were targeted at Black people. And what have we seen 2 years later? That you could have had 3 vaccines, 4 boosters, and whatever else comes with it. We still seeing COVID just ravaging our communities. Why? Because we have, as Black people, we have core morbidities. There's a food desert in our neighborhood, right? We don't know how to eat right? We don't know the drugs in our community, the liquor stores in our community, the fast foods. So we have to change our mindset. And I can say this about the Nation of Islam. We have a separate type of teaching. We have a teaching where it is a separate government, a separate education system. We are taught how to eat to live. We have the economic blueprint so that we can do for ourselves. And then we have the ability to govern ourselves. When we talk about the answer for Black people, we in the Nation of Islam, we have that answer to Black people. But we have to know that we are God's people, and we have to be able to walk in it and not take on somebody else's religion that was given to us in order to control us.
Yes. Brother Deric.
Yes, just everything that we're discussing is relative to the case of our dear brother Roderick Brooks. The reason that Roderick Brooks is dead as an unarmed Black man in an underserved zip code is because there's a dog whistle out there among law enforcement and among the likes of the one who killed our brothers and sisters in Buffalo, that Black blood is cheap.
Mm.
It's cheaper than the products in the Dollar General.
Wow.
It comes cheap.
And
that you know, the slogan Black Lives Matter, we've become desensitized to that, almost to the point to where we really need to replace it with the slogan that says Black lives don't matter, and what are we going to do about it?
Come on.
Because it doesn't. It does not. And so I would just advise our people and make a plea to our people. Don't get comfortable. Don't go to sleep. No matter what creature comforts you may have, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that no individual can rise above the condition of his people. So if Roderick Brooks could be considered one of those who were in one of the worst conditions, that's you. That's you. You know why? Because he would kill you as a Black senator if he could, the same way he killed that brother as a shampoo shoplifter. And that's the mentality that we have to have. That's where our separation comes from. It comes from the independent thought that says at the end of the day, we all we got.
That's right.
And I think we really, as Sister Sadiyah said, we need to start with the mind. Because if you don't change the mentality, you don't change the reality.
Yes.
But beyond that, start with the dollar. That's number 2. Because where you spend your money, that's where your mind is. That's where your heart is. And if we can prove that we have the discipline to use that was it $3 trillion in spending power, that we have to empower ourselves, $1.3 trillion to empower one another, I think that will be one of the greatest indications that we're ready for independence. We're mature enough to be able to govern and control our own neighborhoods, police our own neighborhoods. We cannot get away from doing this thing ourselves. And it goes back again to the Sesame Street situation. What else do you want to see? Say racism on Sesame Street. What else do you need to see?
You know, something you just said, Brother Deric, it just made my heart just drop in my stomach, man. You said that this brother, Roderick Brooks' life was less than a shampoo.
If he was stealing out of the Dollar General, what could be value high enough in the Dollar General for you to really even get out and chase him?
My God.
I mean, think about it.
So what's next, Sister Sadiyah and Brother Deric, relative to this case?
So immediately, we're asking for the dash cam to be released. We've been every day we ask the family is asking, and they're being gaslit. as to when it's going to happen. They said hopefully by the end of this week. Well, the end of this week is here. They're saying it's still an ongoing investigation, but we know that the dash cam is available. On today, we're having a.
So he had on body camera and the dash cam?
Oh, the dash cam from the vehicle.
From the vehicle, but I'm saying, but he also had his body camera, and do we know that it was on?
Oh, it was.
So his body camera is on and his dash cam was on.
Absolutely.
Yes. And they've also excuse me, Sister Sadiyah, but they also confiscated video footage from surveillance cameras in the area.
Oh, so off of buildings and commercial
They've
properties.
got all of that.
And there are bystanders who have video as well.
So they got camera
Yes.
So who did they turn those videos into?
To Harris County Sheriff's Department.
To the Sheriff's Department.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So they have that. So, why they're stalling, of course, we know why they're stalling, because they know that there's going to be a tremendous amount of liability, as you heard Brother talked about, that they are talking to him to try to use us to qualm the communities from not being upset.
So this sounds like something that's going to be even more attention grabbing than George Floyd.
Well, tell them what the person we met with said.
It's worse.
This is worse than what we saw with George Floyd.
This is from someone on the inside that saw it.
It's worse. And
This is
so
what
we
we
understand. But and my understanding is the officer's not cooperating because he should have been fired. So the family's asking for immediate termination. We're asking for it to see the body cam. Today we will have a candlelight vigil at 7 p.m. At the Dollar General off of Kirkendall and Balmerwood.
Mm-hmm.
Tomorrow is Brother Roderick's wake. On Friday, Brother Roderick's funeral. And the family's going to lay him to rest in Longview, Texas. So right now the family is focusing on laying their brother to rest.
Yes.
Yes.
But there will be direct action. And I think, I know the reason that they're preventing the video from coming out is because they're trying to avoid that. But you're only making it worse.
Yeah.
You're only making it worse because you're playing with this grieving family, and you're playing with the intelligence of the people. We are a peaceful people, but don't take our kindness for blindness, and don't take our meekness for weakness. Release the video. Let the truth come out, and let the chips fall where they may.
So we're warning, not just you all, the family. We're warning the release of the dash cam, the body cam, and all the other footage.
That's right.
Yes.
As well as the autopsy.
Correct.
And anything else. We're asking, because I believe the community would want to get behind this effort as well. I know I am.
We want transparency so that we can get at the truth of the matter.
Okay. Well, it's definitely be in the Forward Times newspaper. We're going to highlight this story and keep the pressure on ourselves. And I thank you all so much for being on Real Talk Junkies on today and for sharing this information. Very, very troubling, but you have my support, and I know you have support of many of our RTJs. All right. Thank you, guys. All right, guys, that'll do it for this edition of Real Talk Junkies on today. Make sure you share the link. We'll be uploading on YouTube. Make sure you check it out on our Forward Times YouTube channel. And until next week, y'all, remember, don't argue with me. I'll holler back. Peace.